Welcome to a new edition of That's a Good Cup of Joe. So, we've been engaged in a war with Iran for more than 60 days now. And every time we turn around, it looks like things are not getting best for us. They seem to be getting worse. And I believe, in a situation where we're in a no-win scenario. I mean, comparatively, if this was Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan and Star Trek period, and James Kirk was about to take the Kobayashi Maru test, I would say he would fail. This is the failing of the Kobayashi Maru. And I gotta tell you, all of this is because of a decision that he made in the first administration, was to pull out from the JCPOA, the original Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in regards to Iran's nuclear ambitions. I mean, this is the thing that bothers me with this whole thing, is that there's no perfect resolution to any conflict nations have against each other, because each nation believes they have a sovereign right to run their country the way they need to run it. Whether we agree with it or not, every country believes that it's their sovereign right to rule over their people, to develop their nations and cultures the way they see fit, without being imposed upon by another nation. And that's kind of hard to a degree, because we have neighbors, right? All actions that happen within a country spills over into relations with other countries. And because of travel, we have our other people visiting other countries and so forth and so that. So, how you live your life in one country and you get visited by another individual from another country, there is a interaction. And then there's also commerce. Countries work with each other, sell goods and services to each other. And this just shows that even though we may believe that we have a sovereign right to govern ourselves, we work with other nations. We are neighbors with other nations, whether it's across the sea, whether it's right on our borders. These are the things that keep our world together. So there was a plan for Iran. During the Obama administration, they made this plan, this JCPOA plan, in order to curtail and control how they developed their nuclear energy. And this was agreed upon, not just with Iran, but with adjoining countries who also shared an interest into whether this plan succeeded. And again, like I said, there are no perfect resolutions. So, we spoke on this before in my last video, and we went through the plan. And then, as you know, there's the initial plan, and then there are the annexes that went into the agreements of each section, of each part, to really give it more flavor and understanding as to what was involved in this thing. So it took the Obama administration 20 months of formal negotiations to hammer out this deal, right? So you can say that there were secret talks in regards to this, which began in 2013. And then they had the initial agreement by November of 2013, and then They had the final agreement signed in Vienna on July 14th, 2015. Okay? So like I said, it took them roughly around 20 months to negotiate this deal. So when Donald Trump decided to deep six this whole thing, like everything else, did he have a plan? Did he ever thought about what would happen the next day after the United States pulled out of this? No, he didn't. You know, I mean, planning is not one of his real fortes. You know, because everything is done on a knee-jerk reaction, right? I mean, even with right now what we have going on in regards to his dealing with Iran. Because, you know, by mid-25, you know, during the escalation phase of this whole thing with Iran, there were new sanctions, pressure, and military deployments in the Persian Gulf, increased tension involving Iranian proxy groups in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and in the Red Sea, public warnings from both Washington and Tehran against direct attacks. So it was constantly back and forth. So by the summer of 2025, then they had gotten into the real confrontations, right? Which led to the major crisis period, which began in 2026, where Trump publicly warned Iran against violent crackdowns. The U.S. considered very strong options, including possible military actions, and then Iran warned against retaliations against the U.S. if they were an attack. And then, lo and behold, we went right into it. Escalations. And the issue is that he was probably warned about this. He was probably warned about everything that was going to happen, which it did. They seized the Strait of Hormuz, right? And now we've got this blockade and stuff and everything. So much has happened in concentration that it's so hard to understand exactly what the end game is here. I mean, he keeps saying that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. I cannot see that happening. I mean, he is so desperate because the price of gas and over averaging close to $5 per gallon. I mean, come on. I mean, even yesterday, you know, we had to make a decision on whether or not we're going to do a full tank or maybe we'll just, you know, fill it up, put $25 into it right now, and then go to another gas station that we know was going to have cheaper prices than the price we paid originally for this one. And that's how Americans right now is governing their pocketbooks. They're misinterpreting our society, the ability of corporations being able to capitalize on these things. And this is what he continually does to speak on, about how well the companies are doing, but the American people, they're suffering with this. And this entire crisis is man-made, which initiated with his initial attack against Iran. So this is where we are. The need to make a deal. The need for him to say, you know what? We're going to do this. You know, we're going to have a perfect deal. We're going to have a better deal than Obama administration did. And you got to ask yourself, you know, was it really that bad? I mean, like I said, there is no perfect resolution or negotiation. There is this understanding between nations about, we will do this, you will do that, we will do this together. Because each nation had their own self-interest involved. Their own self-interest. No one wants to be governed by another country. The invasion, right? Nobody wants to be invaded by militarily or even culturally by other nations, which is kind of also, you know, what we're dealing with in the U.S. to a degree. Because there are individuals that feel that immigrants coming into this country is an invasion, when in fact the core principle of the United States of America is based on the fact that other people come here to become citizens. That's what makes this country great, unlike other nations. We incorporate what we feel is the best of all nations of the world coming here to make our country better. Lady Liberty, that's what she stands for. The beacon of hope, and to be able to flourish here in this country. But in regards to what's going on with the U.S. and Iran, with this nuclear thing that's happening, it's not looking good, because whatever deal that is being negotiated on behalf of the United States in regards to Iran and the Straits of Hormuz is so volatile that they keep talking about that maybe the deal that wind up being this will be the worst deal than what would be thought of as if we were still under the original JCPOA. So what I would like to do is to continue our trek through the original JCPOA Iran nuclear deal and to see exactly what is involved in it. You know, what is it that made this what the best negotiated agreement between these countries, not just Iran, but even including Russia and other nations that agreed to this. So it wasn't just the U.S., it even had support from the United Nations. And that's incredible. So what I would like us to do is to go through what is to be the Annex. Now, there are different annexes in regards to the nuclear agreement, which breaks out different, which breaks out everything that was agreed upon. So it wasn't a 15 bullet point plan sheet of paper. There was really in-depth negotiations and understanding. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is that we're going to go through Annex number 1. Like I said, we already read the initial agreement in my last video, so we're going to go through each and every section of the Annex, which is the nuclear related measures, which is the ball game in regards to negotiations, which even right now Iran is not even entertaining a conversation in regards to nuclear enrichment and nuclear conversations. This whole thing with them right now is basically centering upon the Straits of Hormuz. So that shows you right then and there that had he left then the agreement in place, we would probably be in a different thing. Because in a nutshell, anything Obama did, Donald Trump made it his I wouldn't say God-given mission, because I don't think God had any plan in this at all. Could be the other guy's mission to destroy everything that Obama had in place. So we're going to go deep into Annex number 1 of the nuclear agreement. Okay, so with this, we have the under Annex 1, nuclear related measures, letter A, we have the general consensus of why this thing is put together, this understanding, and it states this: the sequence of implementation of the commitments detailed in this annex is specified in Annex 5 to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, unless otherwise specified. The duration of the commitments in this annex are from implementation day. Okay, so from implementation day onward is how this whole plan would be initiated. And we got to understand that the implementation of the Iran nuclear deal begins. Hold on one second. Let me get this. The implementation day of the Iran nuclear nuclear deal began on Saturday, January 16th, 2016. Okay, that was implementation day. So that's where it springboard on to start this whole thing. And the part that we're going to get into is going to actually go into timelines. And timelines are always important, because instead of looking at the deal as it is spelled out and into its longevity in the time that it covers, a lot of the issues that were generated in regards to it is the end. Does the end justify the means in regards to this whole thing? So what we're going to do now is that we're going to read through the plan and to see exactly what is in the deal with this whole thing. So we're going to get into section B, which is the Iraq Heavy Water Research Reactor. And it goes through like this. Iran will modernize the Iraq Heavy Water Research Reactor to support peaceful nuclear research and radioisotopes production for medical and industrial purposes. Iran will redesign and rebuild the reactor based on the agreed conceptual design as attached in this annex to support its peaceful nuclear research and production needs and purposes, including testing of fuel pins and assembly prototypes and structural materials. The design will be such as to minimize the production of plutonium and not to produce weapon-grade plutonium in normal operation. The power of the redesigned reactor will not exceed 20 MWth. The E3/EU+3 and Iran share the understanding that the parameters in the conceptual design are subject to possible and necessary adjustments in developing the final design while fully preserving the above mentioned purposes and principles of modernization. 3. Iran will not pursue constructions at the existing unfinished reactor based on its original design and will remove the existing calandria and retain it in Iran. The calandria will be made inoperable by filling any openings in the calandria with concrete such that the IAEA can verify that it will not be used for a future nuclear application. In redesigning and restructuring for a modernized Iraq Heavy Water Research Reactor, Iran will maximize the use of existing infrastructure already installed in the current Iraq Research Reactor. Iran will take the leadership role as the owner and as the project manager and have responsibility for overall implementation of the Iraq modernization project, with the E3/EU+3 participants assuming responsibilities regarding the modernization of the Iraq reactor as described in this annex. A working group composed of E3/EU+3 participants will be established to facilitate the redesigning and rebuilding of the reactor. The international partnership composed of Iran and the working group would implement the Iraq modernization project. The working group could be enlarged to include other countries by consensus of the participants of the working group and Iran. E3/EU plus 3 participants and Iran will conclude an official document expressing their strong commitments to the Iraq modernization project in advance of implementation day, which will provide an assured path forward to modernize a reactor that would refine the responsibilities assumed by the E3/EU plus 3 participants, and subsequently contracts would be included. The participants of the working group will provide assistance needed by Iran for redesigning and rebuilding a reactor consistent with their respective national laws in such a manner as to enable a safe and timely construction and commissioning of the modernized reactor. Iran and the working group will cooperate to develop a full design of the modernized reactor and the design of the subsidiary laboratories to be carried out by Iran and review conformably with international safety standards such that the reactor can be licensed by the relevant Iranian regulatory authority for commissioning and operation. The final design of the modernized reactor and the design of the subsidiary laboratories will be submitted to the Joint Commission. The Joint Commission will aim to complete its review and endorsement within 3 months after the submission of the final design. If the Joint Commission does not complete its review and endorsement within 3 months, Iran could raise the issue through dispute resolution mechanisms envisioned by this JCPOA. The IAEA will monitor the construction and report to the working group for confirmation that the construction of the modernized reactor is consistent with the approved final design. As the project manager, Iran will take responsibility for the construction efforts. E3/EU plus 3 parties will, consistent with their national laws, take appropriate administrative, legal, technical, and regulatory measures to support cooperation. E3/EU plus 3 parties will support the purchase by Iran, the transfer and supply of necessary materials, equipment, instrumentation, and control systems, and technologies required for the construction of the redesigned reactor through the mechanism established by this JCPOA, as well as through exploration of relevant funding contributions. The E3/EU plus 3 parties will also support and facilitate the timely and safe construction of the modernized Iraq reactor and its subsidiary laboratories upon request by Iran through the IAEA technical cooperation, if appropriate, including but not limited to the technical and financial assistance, supply if required materials and equipment, state-of-the-art instrumentations and control systems, and equipment and support for licensing and authorization. The redesigned reactor will use up to 3.67% enriched uranium in the form of UO2 with a mass approximately 350 kilograms of UO2 in a full core load with a fuel design to be reviewed and approved by the Joint Commission. The international partnership with the participation of Iran will fabricate the initial fuel core load for the reactor outside Iran. The international partnership will cooperate with Iran, including through technical assistance, to fabricate, test, and license fuel fabrication capabilities in Iran for subsequent fuel core reloads for future use with its reactor. Destructive and non-destructive testing of this fuel, including post-irradiation examination, which is PI, will take place in one of the participating countries outside of Iran, and that country will work with Iran to license the subsequent fuel fabricated in Iran for the use in the redesigned reactor under the IAEA monitoring. Iran will not produce or test natrum uranium pellets, fuel pins, and fuel assemblies, which are specifically designed for the support of the originally designed Iraq reactor, designated by the IAEA as IR-40. Iran will store under IAEA continuous monitoring all existing natural uranium pellets and IR-40 fuel assemblies until the modernized Iraq reactor becomes operational, at which point these natural uranium pellets and IR-40 fuel assemblies will be converted to UNH, or exchanged with the equivalent quantity of natural uranium. Iran will make the necessary technical modifications to the natural uranium fuel production process line that was intended to supply fuel for the IR-40 reactor design, such that it can be used for the fabrication of fuel reloads for the modernized Iraq reactor. All spent fuel from the redesigned Iraq reactor, regardless of its origin, for the lifetime of the reactor, will be shipped out of Iran to a mutually determined location in E3 and EU plus 3 countries or third countries for further treatment or disposition to provide for the relevant contracts to be concluded, consistent with the national laws with the recipient party within 1 year from the unloading from the reactor or whenever deemed to be safe for transfer by a recipient country. Iran will submit the DIQ for the redesigned reactor to the IAEA, which will include information on the planned radioisotope production and reactor operation program. The reactor will be operated under the IAEA monitoring, and then Iran will operate the fuel manufacturing plant only to produce fuel assemblies for light water reactor and reloads for the modernized Iraq reactor. So, with this part 1, it's basically the implementation sequence timelines for commitments that these things are being designed, right? And with this, Iran will modernize the Iraq heavy water reactor for peaceful research with isotope production. Now, the duration of this pretty much is a permanent measure, okay, with no stated expiration. So here we have something that would be a permanent footprint in regards to Iran with this Iraq reactor. So that there is a win, right? This is what they're going to permanently do. Now, getting into the weeds of everything is really above my pay grade, but the understanding that there is a commitment on both parties as well as adjoining nations is a win. It's an acknowledgement that through soft power negotiation, there was a deal that had to be made here. Obama didn't bomb places. Obama didn't try to, strong arm Iran into anything. Soft power, right? Jim Carrey, who was there to, lead this, right? And, as the chief negotiator of this whole thing, John Kerry was resilient in trying to get this thing through to the finish line. So now we're going to go through the next section, which is the heavy water production plant. All right, so this here, in a nutshell, is the redesigned reactor with minimized plutonium productions and prevent weapons-grade plutonium generation, right? And we're going to understand that this minimization of plutonium reduction is a permanent measure. We're going to go through this, and there's no stated expiration date for this, and we're going to get into that more detail as we go through. So, heavy water production plant, which is next. Okay, so all excess heavy water, which is beyond Iran's need for the modernized Iraq research reactor, the zero-power heavy water reactor, quantities needed for medical research and production of debridate, deliberate solutions and chemical compounds, including, where appropriate, contingency stocks will be made available for export to the international market based on international prices and delivered to the international buyer for 15 years. Iran's needs, consistent with the parameters above, are estimated to be 130 metric tons of nuclear-grade heavy water, or its equivalent in different enrichment period, to commissioning of the modernized Iraq research reactor, and 90 metric tons after the commissioning, including the amount contained in the reactor. Iran will inform the IAEA about the inventory and the production of the HWPP, and will allow the IAEA to monitor the quantities of the heavy water stocks and the amount of heavy water produced, included through the IAEA visits as requested to the HWPP. Okay? So, pretty much a good thing in that arena. So next, we're going to go to the international piece, which is other reactors. Okay? Consistent with this plan, Iran will keep pace with the trend of international technological advancement in relying only on light water for its future nuclear power and research reactors, with enhanced international cooperations, including assurance of supply of necessary fuel. Okay? Iran intends to ship out all spent fuel for the future and present nuclear power and research reactors for further treatment or disposition as provided to the relevant contract to be concluded consistent with natural laws with the recipient party. Okay, so this here is going to be ongoing. Next up after this is we're going to go to the spent fuel exports. Okay, and this is when we're going to get into the technical basis for a lot of things, and we're going to get into more time frames and more understanding. Okay, so what we're going to do is spent fuel reprocessing activities. For 15 years, Iran will not and does not intend to therefore engage in any spent fuel reprocessing or spent fuel reprocessing R&D activities. For the purpose of this annex, spent fuel includes all types of irradiated fuel. For 15 years, Iran will not and does not intend to therefore reprocess spent fuel, except for irradiated enriched uranium targets for production of radioisotopes for medical and peaceful industrial purposes. For 15 years, Iran will not and does not intend to therefore develop, acquire, or build facilities capable of separation of plutonium, uranium, and neptunium from spent fuel or from fertile targets, other than for production of radioisotopes for medical and peaceful industrial purposes. For 15 years, Iran will only develop, acquire, build, or operate hot cells containing a cell or interconnected cells, shielded cells, or shielded glove boxes with dimensions less than 6 cubic meters in volume, compatible with the specifications set out in Annex 1 of the additional protocol. These will be collected with the modernized Iraq research reactor, the Tehran research reactor, and the radiomedicine production complexes, and only capable of the separation and processing of industrial or medical isotopes and non-destructive pi. The needed equipment will be acquired through the procurement mechanism established by this JCPOA. For 15 years, Iran will develop, acquire, build, or operate hot cells containing a cell or interconnected cells, shielded cells or shielded glove boxes with dimensions beyond 60 cubic meters in volume and specifications set out in Annex 1 of the additional protocols only after approved by the Joint Commissions. The E3, EU plus 3 are ready to facilitate all of the destructive and non-destructive examinations of fuel elements and or fuel assembly prototypes, including PI for all fuel fabricated in or outside Iran and irradiated in Iran, using their existing facilities outside of Iran, except for the Iraq Research Reactor Complex. Iran will not develop, build, or acquire or operate hot cells capable of performing PI or seek to acquire equipment to build, develop such of a capability for 15 years. 15 years is a unique time frame. Okay, it's a unique time frame. For 15 years, in addition to continuing current fuel testing activities at the TRR, Iran will undertake a non-destructive post-irradiation examination (PI) of fuel pins, fuel assembly prototypes, and structural materials. These examinations will be exclusive to the Iraq Research Reactor Complex. However, the E3, EU plus 3 will make available their facilities to conduct destructive testing with the Iranian specialists as agreed. The hot cells at the Iraq Research Reactor, in which non-destructive PIs are performed, will not be physically interconnected to cells that process or handle materials for the production of medical or industrial radioisotopes. For 15 years, Iran will not engage in producing or acquiring plutonium or uranium metals or their alloys, or conducting R&D on plutonium or uranium or their alloys, metallurgy or casings, forming or machining plutonium or uranium metal. Iran will not produce, seek, or acquire separate plutonium, highly enriched uranium defined as 20% or greater uranium-235, or uranium-233, or neptunium-237, except for use as laboratory standards or in instruments using neptunium-237 for 15 years. If Iran seeks to radiate R&D on uranium metal-based TRR fuel in small agreed quantities after 10 years and before 15 years, Iran will present this plan to and seek approval by the Joint Commission. So that's a lot. All right. So just to walk through this, because we went through a couple of spaces here. So in regards to the spent fuel, all spent fuel from Iraq reactor will be shipped out of Iran for the reactor's lifetime. Okay. Now, this is the lifetime of the reactor, and then the projected expiration date, pretty much, which is indefinite because it applies to the operational life of the reactor. Now, the average operating life of a commercial nuclear reactor is typically about 40 years, which means that the original design and licensing of life of any reactors built in the 1960s to 1980s. Now, many of the reactors we have in the United States, if we were to comparatively do this, is that have received license extensions from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commissions to operate this long, which means that it can be extended from 40 to 60 years. So then, with those same guidelines, we've also had, extended these reactors to extend to almost 80 years. So it all depends on how these things were negotiated in this deal. Now, when it gets to the heavy water production limits, this is where the 15 years become very significant in regards to this deal. Okay, so that means that Iran will not build additional heavy water reactors for 15 years, right? So this means that from the time of implementation, the expiration date on this would have been 2030. Okay, now remember, we're here in 2026 right now. So had this plan still be in effect, we still had another 4 years left under this plan, which would have restricted Iran from producing any nuclear type of material. Now, understanding the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was finalized in 2015, as I said, adopted in 2015, and officially entered the implementation day in January 16th of 2016. So that means many of the heavy water or uranium enrichment restrictions were written to last approximately 15 years, carrying them into, like I said, 2030 to 2031. Now, had this been in place right now, this is how the timelines would have overlapped with the different presidential administrations, okay? So with the Obama administration, and this happened during the later part of the administration, January 16, 2016, then this agreement went into the Trump administration. Now, in 2018, halfway through his administration, he yanked us out of this agreement. Now, remember, he pulled us out without having a plan afterwards. Instead of entering a negotiation and trying to strengthen the deal or to come up with better options for Iran, he just yanked us out and left us with no safety net. Now, having that in place, this would have went through if he had maintained it. Went through Trump administrations, right? Then it would have been secured through the Biden administration. Now, granted, because Trump yanked us out in 2018, left us no deal. Biden attempted to negotiate a new plan with Iran and trying to get them to get us into a better understanding. Iran said, fuck no. You Americans, he said, basically are so, volatile, and we can't trust what you're saying because the last guy that was here took it out. Had he left it in place, this would have strengthened the Biden's administration plan because Iran would have been under the original agreement. And then as he approached the end of his administration, there could have been a renegotiation coming through. Iran could have been, more amicable to be able to negotiate and sit with this and say, okay, all right, let's do this. Now remember, 2030 was approaching, and it was still 5 years off, but they could have laid the groundwork to begin the conversation, which led us to the current Trump administration. So all this time, Trump would have had something in place that he could have made a deal on, right? He could have, extended it, modified it, strengthened it, do things that would, show that the United States was interested in this deal. It had been remaining, and there was no confrontation. There would have been no confrontation all these years, which led to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, which would have raised gas prices. Because remember, the end of the Trump administration into the Biden administration, we had to deal with COVID. So that in itself created anxious animosity and frustration for the American people because of raising gas prices and everything. But having that behind us to a degree, we still had to deal with certain financial issues in regards to our country. So, but still, had this still been in place, Trump would have had a better footing to negotiate with Iran, right, in regards to this. So, even if it ended at 2030, the current administration would end at June 20th, 2029. So that would have gave the future administration something to work on as in regards to this. So we're talking how many administrations that this deal would have been passed through, which when there was anything that had to have been negotiated, could have happened because there was something in place to begin the conversations. And instead of, slipping, tripping, and falling under Benjamin Netanyahu, you got to say that, he got sold a bad deal by Benjamin Netanyahu in starting this next confrontation with Iran, giving him the false sense of the savior of a nation mental state, because once you tell him that he's a savior of somebody, he's going to ride that, because his ego is the one thing that fuels every single decision he makes. But this is how it would have happened. This is how it would have passed through each administration if the JCPOA was still in effect and given us a stronger standing in the community, the global community, as to the seriousness of how the United States is handling this Iranian nuclear situation. But that's not where we are. But that is just basically what it was. So, again, the key sunset dates included October 25th for termination of milestones under parts of the agreement and the United Nations framework. And then by January 31, the expiration of several enrichment and hard water stockpiles and so forth. And restrictions would have gone away. So the heavy water productions and related nuclear restrictions effectively stretched across five presidential administrations. So there was a plan. There was a plan in handling all of this. And, it was very short-sighted to allow this thing to turn in the way it did. So, next up, enrichment capacity. Okay. And Iran, this is up to number 27 under F, enrichment capacity. Iran will keep its enrichment capacity to no more than 5060 IRA-1 centrifuge machines. So it's 5,060 IR-1 centrifuge machines in no more than 30 cascades in their current configurations and currently operating units at the Annex Fuel Enrichment Plant, FEP, for 10 years. Iran will keep its level of uranium enrichment at up to 3.67% for 15 years. Iran will move the following excess centrifuges and infrastructure not associated with 5060 IR-1 centrifuges in FEP, which will be stored at NANS in the Hall B of FEP under IAEA continuous monitoring. All excess centrifuge machines, including IR-2M centrifuges, excess IR-1 centrifuges, will be used for the replacement of failed or damaged centrifuges of the same type on a one-for-one basis. The UF6 pipework, including subheaders, values, and pressure transducers at cascade level and frequencies, inverts, and the UF6 withdrawal equipment from one of the withdrawal stations, which is currently not in service, including its vacuum pumps and chemical straps. For the purpose of this annex, the IAEA will confirm through the established practice that failed or damaged status of centrifuge machines before removal. For 15 years, this is 31, for 15 years, Iran will store gas centrifuges machines or enrichment-related infrastructure, whether suitable for uranium enrichment, research and development, or stable isotope enrichment exclusively at the locations for the activities specified under this JCPOA. Okay? More technical garbly-gook, but it continues on. And again, 15 years, 10 years, no matter what it's called, what is looked at, there was a time frame that would allow this to cover. And soft power negotiation would be able to extend anything that is in place. Because if you have something in place, you can fix it, you can extend it, you can rework it, you can do whatever you want because you have a ground-based understanding between all parties involved. Now, next is centrifuges research and development. 32. Iran will continue to conduct enrichment R&D in a manner that does not accumulate enriched uranium for 10 years, and consistent with its enrichment R&D plan. Iran's enrichment R&D with uranium will only include IR4, IR5, IR6, and IR8 centrifuges. Mechanical testings on up to 2 single centrifuges for each type will be carried out only on the IR2M, IR4, IR5, IR6, IR6S, IR7, and IR8. Iran will build or test with or without uranium only those gas centrifuges specified in this JCPOA. Consistent with this plan, Iran will continue working with the 164 machine IR2M Cascade at the PFEP in order to complete the necessary tests until 30 November 2015, or the day of implementation of the JCPOA, whichever comes later, and after that it will take these machines out of the PFEP and store them under the IAEA continuous monitoring at Annex in Hall B for the FEP. Consistent with this plan, Iran will continue working with the 164 machine IR4 Cascade at the PFEP in order to complete the necessary tests until 30 November 2015, or the day of implementation of the JCPOA, whichever comes later, and after that it will take these machines out of the PFEP to store them under the IAEA continuous monitoring at Nance Hall B of FEP. Iran will continue the testing of the single IR4 centrifuge machine and the IR4 centrifuge cascade of up to 10 centrifuge machines for 10 years. Iran will test a single IR5 centrifuge machine for 10 years. Iran will continue testing the IR66 on single centrifuge machines and its intermediate cascades, and will commence testing of up to 30 centrifuge machines from 1.5 years before the end of a 10-year. Iran will proceed from single centrifuge machines and small cascades to intermediate cascades in a logical sequence. Iran will commence upon start of implementation of the JCPOA testing of the IR8 on single centrifuge machines and its intermediate cascades, and will commence the testing of up to 30 centrifuge machines from 1.5 years before the end of year 10. Iran will proceed from single centrifuges to the small cascades to intermediate cascades to a logical sequence. For 10 years, Iran, consistent with the established practice, will recombine the enriched and depleted streams from the IR6 and the IR8 cascades through the use of welded pipework on withdrawal main headers in a manner that precludes the withdrawal of enriched and depleted uranium materials, and verified from the IAEA. For 15 years, we're at number 40 now. For 15 years, Iran will conduct all testing of centrifuges with uranium only at the PFEP. Iran will conduct all mechanical testing of centrifuges only at the PFEP and the Tehran Research Center. For the purpose of adapting the PFP to the R&D activities in the enrichment and enrichment R&D plan, Iran will remove all centrifuges except those needed for testing as described in the relevant paragraph above, except for the IR1 cascade, number 1, as described below, the full IR1 cascade, number 6. Iran will modify associated infrastructure by removing UF6 pipework, including subheaders, valves, and pressure transducers at cascade levels and frequency inverters. The IR1 cascade number 1 centrifuges will be kept but made inoperable as verified from the IAEA through the removal of centrifuge rotors and the injection of epoxy resin into the subheaders, feeding product and tails pipework, and the removal of controls and electrical systems for vacuum power, including excess centrifuges and infrastructure, will be stored at NAND in Hall B of EFP under the IAEA continuous monitoring, the R&D space in line number 6, will be left empty until Iran needs to use it for its R&D program. 42. Consistent with the activities in the enrichment R&D plan, Iran will maintain the cascade infrastructure for testing of single centrifuges and small and intermediate cascades in 2 R&D lines, number 2 and number 3, and will adapt 2 other lines, number 4 and number 5, with infrastructure similar to that for lines number 2 and number 3, in order to enable future R&D activities as specified in this JCPOA. Adaptations will include modification of all US6 pipework, including removal of all subheaders, except as agreed as needed for the R&D program, and associate instrumentation to be compatible with single centrifuges and small intermediate cascade testing instead of full-scale testing. 43. Consistent with its plan and internationally established practices, Iran intends to continue R&D on new types of centrifuges through computer modeling and simulations, including at universities. For any such project to proceed to a prototype stage for mechanical testing within 10 years, a full presentation to and approved by the Joint Commission is needed. That is a lot. That is a lot. There's a lot of monitoring, follow-up, attention to detail in regards to every aspect of their reactor protocols. So my question is now to the Trump administration, how detailed are you getting into the weeds in regards to their nuclear program? Are you discussing this aspect of this whole thing? Because if Iran is saying that they're not negotiating anything in regard to nuclear power or nuclear weapons or nuclear this, and they're just concentrating on the Strait of Hormuz, then you're missing the entire ball game in working a deal out with Iran. And this is why they are saying, and honestly, we're up to just page 12 of this almost 29-page document. And that's how detailed the negotiations were with the original JCPOA deal with Iran. It's incredible. Like I said, this is the nerd stuff, okay? But the thing is, the nerd stuff is the important stuff, because this is the brain stuff. This is the intellectualizing of this entire thing. Okay? This is the thought process. This isn't a feeling process like Trump likes to do. I have feelings about what I do. I have feelings. I based on how I feel today. How I'm going. If I feel like bombing somebody, I'm going to bomb somebody. Right? If I want to send somebody out to do this, if I want to say I want somebody arrested, I feel like that's what I'm going to do. That's not what this is about. This is about intellectually analyzing what needs to happen, what will happen, what can be agreed upon, what can't be agreed upon. So we got this entire document. And again, like I said, we're up to only page 12 of 29. So, understand, had this been in place for 15 years, this would have carried it from the end of the Obama administration through every single administration till now and into the future. Okay? Into the future. 2030, everybody. 2031, everybody. Iran would have still been in this place where we could have had a stronger posture in regards to negotiation than what we have now. So, the Fordo Fuel Enrichment Plant, 44. The Fordo Fuel Enrichment Plant, FFEP, will be converted into a nuclear physics and technology center, and an international collaboration will be encouraged and agreed areas of research. The Joint Commission will be informed in advance of specific projects that will be undertaken at Fordo. Oversight, right? Cooperation, collaboration with the international community, right? Physics and Technology Center, all right? Research and development, right? Teaching. How do you do that? We understand it. These specific projects will go through a committee. 45. Iran will not conduct any uranium enrichment or any uranium enrichment related to R&D and will have no nuclear material at Fordo Fuel Enrichment Plant FFEP for 15 years. Again, until 2031. For 15 years, Iran will maintain no more than 1,044 IR-1 centrifuge machines at one wing of the FFP, of which 2 cascades that have not experienced UF6 before will be modified for the production of stable isotopes. The transition to stable isotope production of these cascades at FFP will be conducted in joint partnership between the Russian Federation and Iran on the basis of agreements to be mutually agreed upon. To prepare these 2 cascades for installation of a new cascade architecture appropriate for the stable isotope production by the joint partnership, Iran will remove the connection to the UF6 feed main header and move cascade UF6 pipework, except for the dump line, in order to maintain vacuum. To storage in Forno under the IAEA continuous monitoring, the Joint Commission will be informed about the conceptual framework of the stable isotope production at FFEP. For 4 cascades with all associated infrastructure remaining except for the pipework that enables crossover tandem connections, 2 will be placed in an idle state, not spinning. The other 2 cascades will continue to spin until the transition of stable isotope production described in the previous subparagraph has been completed. Upon completion of the transition to stable isotope production described in the previous subparagraph, these 2 spinning cascades will be placed in an idle state, not spinning. 47. Iran will 47.1 remove the other 2 cascades of IR-1 centrifuges from this wing by removing all centrifuges and cascade UF6 pipework, including the subheaders, valves, and pressure transducers at cascade level and frequency inverters. Also subsequently remove cascade electrical cabling, individual cascade control cabinets, and vacuum pumps. All these excess centrifuges and infrastructure will be stored at NANS in Hall B of FEP under IAEA continuous monitoring. You hear that, right? Continuous monitoring, right? Continuous monitoring. Continuous monitoring over and over and over again. Eyes on the ground in there. 48. Iran will remove all excess centrifuges and uranium enrichments related infrastructure from the other wing of the FFEP. This will include removal of all centrifuges of UF6 pipework, including subheaders, valves, and pressure gauges and transducers and frequency inverters and converters and UF6 feed and withdrawal station. Also subsequently, remove cascade electrical cabling, individual cascade control cabinets, vacuum pumps, and centrifuge mounting blocks. All of these excess centrifuges and infrastructure will be stored at NANS in Hall B of FEP under IAEA continuous monitoring. There you go again, continuous monitoring. Iran will limit its stable isotope production activities with gas centrifuges to the FFEP for 15 years and will use no more than 348 IR-1 centrifuges for these activities at the FFP. The associated R&D activities in Iran will occur at the FFP and at Iran's declared and monitoring centrifuge manufacturing facilities for testing, modification, and balancing these IR-1 centrifuges. The IAEA will establish a baseline for the amount of uranium legacy from the past enrichment operations that will remain at Fordow. Iran will permit the IAEA regular access, including daily, as requested by the IAEA, access to the FFP in order to monitor Iran's production of stable isotopes and the absence of undeclared nuclear material and activities at the FFP for 15 years. So that just means, again, till 2030. Okay? And again, constant monitoring, able to negotiate, able to make adjustments based upon certain parameters that is being maintained during the course of this entire deal. All right, so this is, now understand, if we were still in this deal, all these things would have been able to keep their levels down, prevent them from executing. Remember, a lot of this stuff is, we're pulling this stuff away from you, sending it to other countries, changing the conditions and your ability, converting your reactors to a more educational aspect in regards to their work and what they're trying to do. So these are the things that Iran agreed upon. And yes, trust but verify, but also not trust but still verify. All these mechanisms in place is exactly what an agreement is. And that is something that we all need to remember. Remember, there are no perfect deals. There's just a mutual understanding against in regards to parties coming to an agreement, right? Coming to an agreement that they can work with. And this JCPOA is an agreement between the countries that they are willing, through soft power on each side, to be able to work with and work with other countries in regards. Okay, so now we're going to other aspects of enrichment. Letter I. Next, line 52. Iran will abide by its voluntary commitments as expressed in its own long-term enrichment and enrichment R&D plan to be submitted as part of the initial declaration described in Article 2 of the additional protocol. The IAEA will confirm that on an annual basis, for the duration of the plan, that the nature and scope and scale of Iran's enrichment and enrichment R&D activities are in line with this plan. Iran will start to install necessary infrastructure for the IR-8 at Annex in Hull B of FEP after year 10. If agreed template, an agreed template for describing different centrifuges types, IR1, IR2M, IR4, IR5, IR6, IR6S, IR7, IR8, and the associated definitions need to be accomplished by implementation day. An agreed procedure for measuring IR1, IR2M, and IR4 centrifuges performance data needs to be accomplished by implementation day. So these things need to be made sure by implementation day that everything would have been, on the up and up in regard to these. All right, J. Uranium stocks and fuel. 56. As part in this, and there is a subline in 1, which states, Iran will permit the IAEA to share the content of the enrichment and enrichment R&D plan as submitted as part of the initial declaration with the Joint Commission participants. So that's nice, right? So everybody will see exactly what Iran is doing. That's the bottom line in that. So with uranium stocks and fuel under J, Iran will maintain a total enriched uranium stockpile of no more than 300 kilograms of up to 3.67% enrichment uranium hexafluoride, or the equivalent in different chemical forms for 15 years. All enriched uranium hexafluoride in excess of 30 kilograms of up to 3.67% enriched UF6, or the equivalent in different chemical forms, will be down blended to natural uranium levels or be sold on the international market and delivered to the international buyer in return for natural uranium delivered to Iran. Iran will enter into a commercial contract with an entity outside Iran for the purchase and transfer of its enriched uranium stockpile in excess of 300 kilograms UF6 in return for the natural uranium delivered to Iran. The E3 and EU+3 will facilitate, where applicable, the conclusion and implementation of this contract. Iran may choose to seek to sell excess enriched uranium to the IAEA fuel bank in Kazakhstan when the fuel bank becomes operational. 58. All uranium oxide enriched to between 5% and 20% will be fabricated into fuel plates for the Tehran research reactor or transferred, based on a commercial transaction, outside of Iran or diluted to an enrichment level of 3.67% or less. Scrap oxide and other forms not in plates that cannot be fabricated to TR fuel plates will be transferred based on a commercial transaction outside of Iran or diluted to an enrichment level of 3.67% or less. In case of future supply of 19.75 enriched uranium oxide, U3O8, for TRR fuel plates fabrication, all scrap oxide and other forms not in plates that cannot be fabricated into TR fuel plates containing uranium enriched to between 5% and 20% will be transferred based on a commercial transaction outside of Iran or diluted to an enrichment level of 3.67% or less within 6 months of its production. Scrap plates will be transferred based on a commercial transaction outside of Iran. The commercial transaction should be structured to return to equivalent amount of natural uranium to Iran. For 15 years, Iran will not build or operate facilities for converting fuel plates or scrap back to UF6. Okay. All right. So, 59. Russian design, fabricated, and licensed fuel assemblies for use in Russian-supplied reactors in Iran do not count against the 300 kilogram UFC stockpile limit. Enriched uranium in fabricated fuel assemblies from other sources outside of Iran for the use in Iran's nuclear research and power reactors, including those which will be fabricated outside of Iran for the initial fuel load of the modernized Arak research reactor, which are certified by the fuel supplier and the appropriate Iranian authority to meet international standards, will not count against the 300K UFC stockpile limit. The Joint Commission will establish a technical working group with the goal of enabling fuel to be fabricated with Iran while adhering to the agreed stockpile parameters. 300 kilograms of up to 3.67% enriched UF6 or the equivalent in different chemical forms. This technical working group will also within 1 year work to develop objective technical criteria for assessing whether fabricated fuel and its intermediate products can be readily converted to UF6. Enriched uranium in fabricated fuel assemblies and its intermediate products manufactured in Iran and certified to meet international standards, including those of the modernized Iraq research reactor, will not count against the 300 kilograms UF6 stockpile limit, provided the technical working group of the Joint Commission approves that such fuel assemblies and their intermediate products cannot be readily converted into UF6. This could, for instance, be achieved through impurities, example, burnable poisons or otherwise, contained in fuels, or through the fuel being in a chemical form such that direct conversion back to UF6 will be technically difficult without dissolution and purification. The objective technical criteria will guide the approval process of the technical working group. The IAEA will monitor the fuel fabrication process for any fuel produced in Iran to verify that the fuel and intermediate products comport with the fuel fabrication process that was approved by the technical working group. The Joint Commission will also support assistance to Iran, including through the IAEA technical cooperation as appropriate, in meeting international qualification standards for nuclear fuel produced by Iran. 60. Iran will seek to enter into a commercial contract with entities outside of Iran for the purchase of fuel for the TRR and enriched uranium targets. The E3 and EU+3 will fabricate as needed. The conclusion and implementation of this contract, in the case of lack of conclusion of the contract with a fuel supplier, E3 UE+3 will supply a quantity of 19.75% enriched uranium oxide U3O8 and deliver to Iran exclusively for the purpose of fabrication in Iran of fuel for the TRR and enriched uranium targets for the lifetime of the reactor. This 19.75% enriched uranium oxide U3O8 will be supplied in increments no greater than approximately 5 kilograms, and each new increment will be provided only when the previous increment of this material has been verified by the IAEA to have been mixed with aluminum to make fuel for the TRR or fabricated into enriched uranium targets. Iran will notify the E3 EU+3 within 2 years before the contingency of the TRR fuel will be exhausted in order to have the uranium oxide available 6 months before the end of the 2-year period. Okay? It's a lot of nerd jargon there, but this is the nuance of having this program. Getting into the technical data, information of making sure that things are proceeding according to plan. Now, next is the K, which is centrifuge manufacturing. 61. Consistent with its enrichment and enrichment R&D plan, Iran will only engage in production of centrifuges, including centrifuge rotors, suitable for isotope separation and any other centrifuge component to meet the enrichment and enrichment R&D requirements of this annex. Consistent with this plan, Iran will use the stock of IR1 centrifuge machines in storage, which are in excess of the remaining 5,060 IR1 centrifuges in Nance and IR1 centrifuges installed at Fordow for the replacement of failed or damaged machines. Whenever during the 10-year period from the start of the implementation of the JCPOA, the level of stock of IR1 machines falls to 500 or below, Iran may maintain a level of stock by resuming production of IR1 machines at a rate up to the average monthly crash rate without exceeding the stock of 500. Consistent with this plan, at the end of year 8, Iran will commence manufacturing of IR6 and IR8 centrifuges without rotors through year 10 at a rate of up to 200 centrifuges per year for each type. After year 10, Iran will produce complete centrifuges with the same rate to meet its enrichment and enrichment R&D needs. Iran will store them at Nance in an above-ground location where IAEA continuous monitoring until they are needed for final assembly according to the enrichment R&D plan. Okay, we're going to go next to additional protocol and modify code 3.1. 64 starts with Iran will notify the IAEA of provisional application of the additional protocol to its safeguards agreement in accordance with Article 7b of the additional protocol pending its entry into force, and subsequently seek ratification and entry into force consistent with the respective roles of the President and the Majaz Parliament. 65. Iran will notify the IAEA that it will fully implement the modified Code 3.1 of the subsidiary agreement of Iran Safeguards Agreement as long as the safeguard agreement remains in force. Next up is M, past and present issues of concern. 66. Iran will complete all activities as set out in paragraphs 2, 4, 5, and 6 of the roadmap to clarification of past and present outstanding issues, as verified by the IAEA and its regular updates by the Director General of the IAEA on the implementation of this roadmap. Next up is N, modern technologies and long-term presence of the IAEA. Now, this is very important. 67 states, for the purpose of increasing the efficiency of monitoring for the JCPOA for 15 years or longer. Okay? 15 years or longer, which means that year 2030, there are chances, long-term presence beyond that. Okay, which means that the possibility of renegotiation is always on the table. And as long as things are working together, these things can be monitored moving forward. So, 67.1 reads, Iran will permit the IAEA to use the use of online enrichment measurement and electronic seals which communicate their status within nuclear sites to the IAEA inspectors, as well as other IAEA-approved and certified modern technologies in line with internationally accepted IAEA practice. Iran will facilitate automated collection of IAEA measurement recording registered by installed measurement devices and sending the IAEA working space in individual nuclear sites. So they're going to have an office inside the nuclear sites. Then it goes to Iran will make the necessary arrangements to allow for long-term IAEA presence, including issuing long-term visas, as well as providing proper working space at nuclear sites and with best efforts at locations near nuclear sites in Iran for the designated IAEA inspectors for working and keeping necessary equipment. Next, Iran will increase the number of designated IAEA inspectors to a range of 130 to 150 within 9 months from the date of the implementation of the JCPOA, and will generally allow the designation of inspectors from nations that have diplomatic relations with Iran consistent with its laws and regulations. So, oversight, key to making this thing work. In effect, with this agreement, inspectors going in and checking out things. Next up is transparency related to uranium ore concentrate. Iran will permit the IAEA to monitor through agreed measures that will include containment and surveillance measures for 25 years that all uranium ore concentrate produced in Iran or obtained from any other source is transferred to uranium conversion facility in Efshan or any other future uranium conversion facility which Iran might decide to build in Iran within this period. So that's 25 years. The 15 years will take it to 30. All right? 15. 25 years would take it to 40. You get that? All right? Oversight. Long-term monitoring. Okay? Again, 69. Iran will provide the IAEA with all necessary information, such as the IAEA will be able to verify the production of the uranium ore concentrate and the inventory of uranium ore concentrate produced in Iran or obtained from any other source for 25 years. So that's the increasing, right? Long scale. So we're now at monitoring until 2040. Next, transparency related to enrichment. For 25 years, Iran will, for 15 years, I'm into this 25 years because it sounds so good, but 15 years, which would be until 2030. For 15 years, Iran will permit the IAEA to implement continuous monitoring, including through containment and surveillance measures as necessary, to verify that stored centrifuges and infrastructure remain in storage and are only used to replace failed or damaged centrifuges as specified in its annex. Iran will permit the IAEA regular access, including daily access as requested by the IAEA to relevant buildings at Annex, including all parts of the FEP and the PFEP, for 15 years. For 15 years, the Annex enrichment site will be the sole location of all of Iran's uranium enrichment related activities, including safeguarded R&D. Iran intends to apply nuclear export policies and practices in line with the internationally established standards for the export of nuclear material, equipment, and technology. For 15 years, Iran will include through export and any enrichment or enrichment-related equipment and technology with any other country or with any foreign entity in enrichment or enrichment-related activities, including related research and development activities following approval by the Joint Commission. Okay, more monitoring, more access, more follow through of point. Q, when we get to Q, we got access. Okay, 74. Requests for access pursuant to provisions of the JCPOA will be made in good faith with due observance of the sovereign rights of Iran and kept to the minimum necessary to effectively implement the verification responsibilities under the JCPOA. In line with normal international safeguards practice, such requests will not be aimed at interfering with Iranian military or other national security activities, but will be exclusively for resolving concerns regarding the fulfillment of this JCPOA commitment and Iran's other non-proliferation and safeguard obligations. The following procedures are for the purpose of the JCPOA implementation between the E3, EU, and 3, and Iran are without prejudice to the safeguard agreement and the additional protocol thereto. In implementing this procedure, as well as other transparency measures, the IAEA will be requested to take every precaution to protect commercial, technological, and industrial secrets, as well as other confidential information coming to its knowledge. In furtherance of implementation of the JCPOA, if the IAEA has concerns regarding undeclared nuclear materials or activities inconsistent with the JCPOA at locations that have not been declared underneath the comprehensive safeguards of this agreement or additional protocol, the IAEA will provide Iran the basis for such concerns and request clarification. If Iran's explanations do not resolve the IAEA's concern, the agency may request access to such locations for the sole reason to verify the absence of undeclared nuclear materials and activities inconsistent with the JCPOA at such location. The IAEA will provide Iran the reasons for access in writing and will make available relevant information. Iran may propose that the IAEA alternative means of resolving the IAEA's concerns that enable the IAEA to verify the absence of undeclared nuclear materials and activities inconsistent with the JCPOA at the location in questions, which should be given due and prompt consideration. if the absence of undeclared nuclear materials and activities or activities inconsistent with the JCPOA cannot be verified after the implementation of the alternative arrangements agreed by Iran and the IAEA, or if the two sides are unable to reach satisfactory agreements to verify the absence of undeclared nuclear material, the activities or activities inconsistent with the JCPOA at the specified location within 14 days of the IAEA's original request for access, Iran, in consultation with the members of the Joint Commission, would resolve the IAEA's concerns through necessary means agreed between Iran and the IAEA. In absence of the agreement, the members of the Joint Commission, by consensus or by vote of 5 or more of its 8 members, would advise on necessary means to resolve the IAEA's concerns. The process of consultation with and any action by the members of the Joint Commission would not exceed 7 days, and Iran would implement the necessary means within 3 additional days. So oversight. I can't stress it enough. This agreed position allows for oversight. And then there are mechanisms that if there's a discrepancy to follow up. This is the plan. You know, and they continue to talk about how imperfect this is. Yes, human nature is to resist certain things that maybe people may feel that's not in their best interest. But when you come to a consensus, an agreement, a plan that 2 parties or 3 parties or a group look to contend to in order to move to a certain position, that in itself is a success. No matter what the flaws may be in it, but the agreed upon floor of understanding, a resolution of understanding, a commitment made within this document is a floor. It's the floor, and then you inspire to go to greater things. But the basic understanding is where we are with this document, with this arrangement. This is what we had, and if it was still in effect, it would still be enforceable today. And then whatever issues that develop along the way can be rationally and taken out, and then there will be consequences. That's because there was something agreed upon. Trump kicked it out. Iran felt no obligation to maintain any of this. Tried to renegotiate when Biden was in it. They felt no need to comply because they couldn't tell from the next election that Trump would be in here and take it all away. And then now we know that with him in power, what did he do? Might makes right, right? My military, my soldiers, my missiles, my armaments. That's where he is right now. Thinking that when you assault, commit to violence, to try to persuade and try to coerce somebody into getting your way, and then you calling it a success. That's not how success works. The ideas of assaulting and hurting and intentionally killing people to inflict pain and harm to get your own way, that's not a success. Soft power negotiation, that brings forth a successful agreement and understanding between parties. And that's what we had here with the JCPOA. So, let's continue on. Where are we? Get to centrifuge component manufacturing transparency. Okay? Iran and the IAEA will take the necessary steps for the containment and surveillance on centrifuge rotor tubes and bellows for 20 years. Okay? 20 years. 20 years would, take it to what? 2035, right? In this context, it goes, Iran will provide the IAEA with an initial inventory of all existing centrifuge rotor tubes and bellows and subsequent reports on changes in such inventory, and will permit the IAEA to verify the inventory by them, counting and numbering, and through containment and surveillance, all rotor tubes and bellows, including in all existing and newly produced centrifuges. Iran will declare all locations and equipment, namely flow-forming machines, filament widening machines, and mandrels that are used for the production of centrifuge rotor tubes or bellows, and will permit the IAEA to implement continuous monitoring, including through containment and surveillance on this equipment, to verify that this equipment is being used to manufacture centrifuges only for the activities specified in this JCPOA. Monitor containment. Next is S. Other uranium isotope separation activities. For 10 years, Iran's uranium isotope separation related research and development and production activity will be exclusively based on gaseous centrifuge technology. Iran will permit IAEA access to verify that uranium isotope separation production and R&D activities are consistent with this annex. And the footnote reads, for the purpose of this annex, non-gaseous centrifuge uranium isotope separation level research and development or production will include laser isotope separation system, electromagnetic isotope separation systems, chemical exchange systems, gaseous diffusion systems, vortex and aerodynamic systems, and other such processes that separate uranium isotopes. This is the nerd stuff, getting into the weeds, getting into the milk and crannies of this arrangement in nuclear activity. Are Marco Rubio and the rest of the Trump delegation getting into this? Or are they just fixated, nothing nuclear? Sovereignty. Country sovereignty. Individual sovereignty of the nations. You can't tell us what we can't do. However, we will come to an agreement. Is this what they're working with? Is this what they're doing over there? We don't know. But this is what was under the JCPOA originally. And I'm telling you, like I said, this is all nerd stuff. This is all brain stuff. This is getting into the milk and crannies of this understanding, this agreement. Next, activities which could contribute to the design and development of a nuclear explosive device. Okay? Listen to this now. Listen to this. 82. Iran will not engage in the following activities which could contribute to the development of a nuclear explosive device. This here is the nutcracker, guys. This is the nutcracker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the core principles behind this agreement of them not to create a nuclear explosive device. This is it, okay? 8201. Designing, developing, acquiring, or using computer models to simulate nuclear explosive devices. Okay, you can't even do a simulation on your computer. Designing, developing, fabricating, acquiring, or using multi-point explosive detonation systems suitable for a nuclear explosive device, unless approved by a Joint Commission of Non-Nuclear Purposes and subject to monitoring. Continue. Designing, developing, fabricating, acquiring, or using explosive diagnostic system, street cameras, framing cameras, or flash X-ray cameras suitable for the development of a nuclear explosive device, unless approved by the Joint Commission for Non-Nuclear Purposes and subject to monitoring. And then finally, designing, developing, fabricating, acquiring, or using explosive-driven neutron sources or specialized material for explosively driven neutron sources. Okay, this is it. This is keeping things away, preventing. And now this goes into the Iraq conceptual design. Okay, fundamental principles: maximize use of the current infrastructure of original design of the Iraq research reactor, designated by the IAEA or IR40 according to their respective ratings. Modernizing of the original design in order to be multi-purpose research reactor comprising radioisotope production, structural materials, and fuel pins and assembly prototypes, testing and able to conduct other neutronic experiments which demand high neutron fluxes more than 10 to the 14th power. Using heavy water or as coolant, moderator, and reflector, light water would be utilized as an annular ring around the compact new core for safety reasons if necessary. Around 78 fuel assemblies in tight hexagonal grid spacing with the following preliminary characteristics will be loaded. Up to 3.67% enriched UO2 in the approved assembly design will be used as fuel. Power will not exceed with 200 megawatts, I believe. 20 megawatts, excuse me. Power will not exceed to 20 megawatts, I believe. I may be wrong with the pronunciation, but that's what it looks. MWTH. Adding different types of beam tubes to the existing beam tubes, which being extended to the edge of the new compact core, having one central channel in the center of the new core with passive cooling systems for the purchase of structural material and fuel pins and assembly prototypes testing with neutron flux beyond 2.10 to the 14th power, 12 in core irradiation channels IIC inside the core and 12 lateral irradiation channels LIC just next to the outer ring for fuel assemblies. The location of the inner core and lateral irradiation channels should be designed and fixed to meet the best anticipated performances. Consistent with the relevant section of Annex 1, subsidiary laboratories are part of the modernization project of the Iraq Research Reactor. In addition, Annex 3 reinforces design and construction of subsidiary laboratories. The highest tolerable pressure for the first and second loop is 0.33 MPa at the entrance of the reactor pit. Then the highest possible flow rate for coolant 610 kilograms at the pressure of 0.33 MPa in the main piping system and 42 kilograms sec for moderator with the same conditions. And then it goes into the preliminary characteristics and so forth. The end game to me is on page 27 of this, which is the activities which could contribute to the design and development of a nuclear explosive device. And that's the end game, right? That was the purpose of this whole thing, to prevent them from creating a nuclear device. Had this agreement, right, this agreement be maintained, we would still be under this agreement as of today. Again, the extension was covering to 2030, right? We had another 4 years, and then there's some elements going out to 2040. So no matter how much the criticism was about the agreement as a whole, the fact that we had something in place was very important. The idea that Donald Trump's inability to let certain things go or to moderate his emotions in regards to certain things, but to create this mindset of retribution and villainizing anything an opponent does as wrong, as bad, the worst case ever. Like I said, this ain't my wheelhouse, but all I know is what I read. And though there are a lot of this that I don't understand in regards to nuclear power and fusion, but the thing I do know is that there are aspects of this agreement that are very beneficial to both parties and allow them to come and create this thing. Again, there is no perfect agreement. There is just the understanding that two parties can get to a place that would allow them to work together and move forward. That's all. And that's what this JCPOA is a means for the negotiating parties to come to a realization and an understanding that would limit the Iranian nation to delay, and of course, delay is to postpone the use of a nuclear device. And as much as we're saying that there can be zero chances of them getting one, you got to look at the rationality of the whole thing. And if you have kids, you know, you can tell your kids, not that I already as a kid, but I'm just using this as an example. You can tell your kids everything that you want them not to do. But you know what? No matter what you guys agree to, I promise I won't smoke, Mom. I promise I won't drink, Dad. I promise you that I won't stay out late at night. But somehow, some way, they're going to find that cigarette. Or they can find the alternative, the vape. They're going to sneak a drink, going out to the corner store because they got a good friend that's 22, and they're going to find them a beer. But with every agreement, you got to have faith in the letter, in the words that you guys agreed to. And like in all things, there are consequences to actions that are taken against things. But like I said, the end game is activities which could contribute to the design and development of a nuclear explosive device, which is the end game here. Page 27 of this document of Appendix 1. This is what it was all building to. Activities which could contribute to the design and development of the nuclear device, and it goes to say Iran will not engage in the following activities which could contribute to the development of a nuclear explosive device. This is what they agreed to. This is the agreement. This here is why it took them almost 20 months to negotiate this, to get them to agree to this. And I want to read this one more time because this is what it's all about. This is the nutshell. This is the game. This is the winning shot at the end of the game when the buzzer reached 1 second. Designing, developing, acquiring, or using computer models to simulate a nuclear explosive device. You won't even get to use a computer. Can't use it. All right? Designing, developing, fabricating, acquiring, or using multi-point explosive detonation systems suitable for a nuclear explosive device unless approved by the Joint Commission for non-nuclear purposes and subject to monitoring. 3. Designing, developing, fabricating, acquiring, or using explosive diagnostic systems, street cameras, framing cameras, or X-ray flash X-ray cameras suitable for the development of a nuclear explosive device unless approved by the Joint Commission for non-nuclear purposes and subject to monitoring. And then for designing, developing, fabricating, acquiring, or using explosively driven neutron sources or specialized material for explosively driven nuclear sources. So, is this what Marco Rubio is negotiating in regards to getting to a current agreement? Because Mr. Kelly did, right? Under the Biden administration, they got Iran to agree to this. So John Kerry, under John Kerry's leadership during these negotiations, following directives by Barack Obama, they were able to negotiate this very document to get to the end and get to an agreement. And if not for the actions of Donald Trump, when he willfully, intentionally destroyed this agreement because of his jealousy of Barack Obama. He was jealous. He's jealous. He still is. Because for the life, he can't get Obama out of his mind. If not for every action he took to destroy this agreement, we would still be under, Iran will still be following it, and the ends would have justified the means, because Iran, as of today, would not have a nuclear-enabled weapon. And as all things, there will always be another negotiation had this been in place. Again, Biden, during his time, he could have helped, he could have worked on getting that extended. And that's what it's all about. Understanding, working, negotiating. That's what this is all about. So as we sit and we wait, markets jumping back and forth, because of they're anticipating Donald Trump's decision-making process. This administration, we don't know. The uncertainty. We don't know what tomorrow is. But all I do know, for 4 years while Biden was in president, I slept very well, knowing that he did care, that he was working, and that he did not need to stay up all night and tweet, because he had capable individuals in his administration handling the day-to-day operations and the overnights, and knew damn well that if he needed to wake up, they will walk up into his Lincoln bedroom and get him and say, "Sir, we have a situation." And Biden would have gotten up, went to the ready room, and handled his shit. Annex 1 of the JCPOA is in the books. We'll be back with another edition of That's a Good Cup of Joe as we continue through the other annexes of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is affectionately known as the Iran nuclear deal. See you next time.